So we're not really getting the benefits of that one, only the drawbacks. Picloram, this is sold under the names Tordon and Grazon. This one is, again, a pretty frequently used herbicide. They use it on broadleaf weeds like glyphosate, so a lot of those invasives and things like that. It's used along rights-of-way and in forestry programs. This one is attributable to liver and kidney damage, also damage of the spleen. It has caused embryo loss in pregnant lab animals, testicular atrophy in lab animals, and the combination of this one with 2,4-D causes birth defects and decreased birth weight. This is another one that, as they're manufacturing it through the industrial process, gets contaminated with hexachlorobenzene, not dioxin, but hexachlorobenzene, which is itself a cancer-causing agent. It affects the liver, the thyroid, kidneys. This one also damages bone and blood cells and can disrupt the endocrine system. So it sort of acts like a hormone when it gets inside your body, can really throw your systems off. And there have been efforts in recent years with the manufacture of this particular herbicide and with others to try to reduce this sort of industrial contamination. I'm not exactly sure what that entails, but you may actually be able to get this one now without the hexachlorobenzene. I'm not sure if that really matters, but just to know. It's also toxic to fish, especially juvenile fish at really low concentrations, so less than 1 part per million. It's persistent and highly mobile in the soil, and it's been sort of, at least in terms of the EPA, the other sort of international environmental regulatory groups have recommended that this be deregistered. But again, oftentimes the efforts of staff at these agencies get overruled by appointees at higher levels that are more susceptible to political and economic fallout. So their suggestions to deregister this pesticide have been largely ignored. Sulfametron methyl. This is kind of a weird one. It's an herbicide. It's a sulfonylurea. Urea is actually found in a lot of stuff. It's in fertilizer. It's a naturally occurring thing. This is used mostly in non-agricultural situations. So this is one that you find a lot along rights-of-way and roadsides, as well as industrial facilities, public lands, places where invasives, are really a problem and where there's a cosmetic concern. This one is also an eye irritant. It causes blurred vision, tearing, all the same stuff. It also results in anemia, atrophy, testicles, testicular lesions, pretty nasty stuff. Because of little monitoring, there's not as much known about how often this one gets into our watersheds, our rivers, and our streams. They're looking more at that, but the USGS has found this herbicide in many rivers in the Midwest, and the Forest Service has detected it in a lot of our streams following forestry applications of this particular herbicide. And then the last one is triclopyr, another broadleaf herbicide. This one's used kind of everywhere, pastures, woodlands, rights-of-way. The brand name for this is Garlon 3A or Garlon 4. That's usually what they call this one. And it comes actually as a liquid or a salt, so you see it in different forms being applied. It's damaging to the kidneys. It's caused a variety of reproductive problems, especially the ester form of this. It's highly toxic to fish and inhibits behaviors in frogs that help them survive. It makes them more susceptible to predators and makes it harder for them to reproduce. It inhibits the growth of fungi, again, the kind of fungi that you want in the ground to help crops and beneficial plants grow. This one wipes those out. It also will have impacts on birds. It kills baby birds. It decreases the rates of survival significantly. The major breakdown product of this particular herbicide is just, it's another chemical. It disrupts the normal growth of development in the nervous system. So in laboratory tests, it accumulates in the brains of animals and it makes them dysfunctional. So, I go through all of this not to be fear-mongering. I don't want to scare anybody, but just to show that there are real problems with herbicides, with registered pesticides. It's legal to use these. EPA regulates these and they're out there, but this is confirmed research. It's not really disputed. These are actual potential health and environmental impacts of exposure to these chemicals. And so it really illustrates the need for an alternative approach, both because of those concerns and because, again, they're not always that effective at solving the problems. If we're having a vegetation problem that needs to be dealt with, having nuking the soil bacteria and fungi with these chemicals is going to make that problem worse in the long run, which means we'll end up using more chemicals, and it's sort of a cycle that perpetuates itself. So in CAP, what we have really made our mission to do is to promote alternatives and more ecological strategies to reduce the use of herbicides, but to actually get at these problems. And so I came tonight with a couple of ideas for your organization to take in your conversations with BPA, and maybe these we can actually talk more about, and get some feedback from you about why these wouldn't work, and we can sort of open it up into a discussion at this point. But one thing that I'll mention is to look at your roadside integrated vegetation management programs. They're usually public documents. I think everyone I've ever seen has been available through the State Department of Transportation website, or you can call them and ask to see a copy. They can mail you one. There's probably an administrative fee or something. But they also usually have these by county, and they differ by county. Some counties have better ones, some counties have worse ones. Here in the Northwest, there are a number of counties that have actually developed these roadside vegetation management plans that minimize herbicide use or that completely eliminate herbicide use. Lane County, where Eugene is, actually has a no-spray policy on their roadsides. You can access their plan through the Lane County Department of Transportation. If you look them up on the Oregon ODOT website, you can access that. Marin County in California, as well as Jefferson County and San Juan counties in Washington, they actually have complete bans on herbicide use as part of their roadside vegetation management plans. Yamhill County in Oregon, same thing. They manage their roadsides using pesticides as a last resort. They do have a goal to reduce pesticide use, but their plan actually does include some chemicals. Clallam County here in Washington doesn't use herbicides on existing roads, or at least they claim not to. And Thurston County has almost a complete ban on the roadsides. So I would encourage looking at these plans and seeing what they're doing. Because it is a state agency, it's a state agency plan, it's been approved, it's been implemented. These are suggestions you can make to other state agencies or to organizations like the BPA as viable suggestions for trying to avoid herbicide use. And again, these are all accessible through the internet or just by contacting these agencies. And they're updated, I think, yearly as well. So you should be able to find pretty recent copies of these documents with data about how effective they've been, how the plans are changing, where they've been most effective and where they haven't been effective. And it's good to know about that kind of stuff too, because you will get questions about that from the BPA if you propose something similar. Another idea is acetic acid, which is vinegar. This is something that a lot of people have turned to as a kind of natural herbicide. The acid content obviously works as broadleaf weed control. It sort of burns down the plant itself. It doesn't necessarily affect the root, although you do get a root kill in some cases with younger plants that have not been established. But there's a lot of vinegar-based herbicide products, which in most cases are going to be preferable to a synthetic chemical that is going to be persistent in the environment and cause all of the various health problems that we've been through. They classify these are going to have in the kitchen. It's like 5% or less acetic acid content there. But you can actually get vinegar-based herbicides with a higher content, like 8% or higher. And those they do have to be registered with the EPA as well. And so there's a little bit of a process for obtaining those. But you have risks with those, obviously. They can irritate your skin, they can burn you, they can cause problems for your eyes like a lot of these other chemicals are. The advantage with these is that they break down into environmentally inert ingredients, water and fatty acids and things like that. They can change your soil pH, which again can damage some of the good bacteria and fungi that you want there. But as a lesser of evils, it's something to look at. Concentrations of 11% or greater, you do have to be careful with those. Again, they can do some damage. And then finally, and maybe the most creative and common sense approach to managing vegetation that we've talked to a lot of people about is actually using animals, and specifically goats. It's proven in a lot of places to be very, very effective. Several counties are doing that here, as well as in other places. They feed on they feed on weeds. I mean, they don't actually go after the grassy stuff. You can graze goats in a pasture, and they just sort of, they don't really discriminate. And in a lot of cases, they can also take care of poisonous plants, poison oak, hemlock, other kinds of stuff, pampas grass, blackberry, even thorny plants. I mean, they really do a pretty good job. And they will actually restore pasture areas so that they're ideal for cattle grazing, so you can actually rotate cattle for the grass, goats for the weeds, and change it out that way. They consume about 25% of their body weight a day, so they are pretty thorough. And they actually offer benefits to the soil as well, obviously in terms of their excrement, and then they actually provide, if you have high enough numbers in the hundreds, their hooves provide a till, and it actually encourages the regrowth of native species and things like that by tilling up the soil. So a lot of places are turning to this as an option, and it does sound strange, but it works. And in terms of risking spreading weed seeds, like you get with sheep sometimes, these grazing problems where they will ingest weeds and then they excrete the seeds elsewhere, and it sort of transports the weeds around. The way that goats chew actually destroys the seeds, and they've run tests on these goats to try to get stuff to grow out of the poop, and the seeds are destroyed. So it's pretty interesting. And there's a couple of places you can turn to here in Washington. One is Healing Hooves, LLC. Their website is healinghooves.com. They're based in Washington. They offer these services. You can hire them to come out. I would suggest that as one place for BPA to look for alternative weed management in the roadside or right of way. You can also talk to your local extension service through Washington State University. Oftentimes they'll have information on this as well. Another one, which is actually, I think they work nationally. They do a lot of work in the Northwest, but they're based sort of on a national scale, is Euphoric Ecological Services. And the woman who runs that is Lonnie Malmberg. She actually is on the board of directors for Beyond Pesticide, which is another pesticide research and advocacy group that works nationally. But she has done a lot of testing, a lot of trials with these goats, and has had a lot of success. So these kind of alternative approaches are one way to address the herbicide risks that you face if BPA chooses to claim a right of way through here. I guess what I would say as a caution is, if your goal, which obviously it is to have them not choose a right of way through here, we should probably talk more about what to do in terms of approaching them with this information, because you don't want to go to them with a concession and say, okay, well, you're going to build this, but just don't use herbicides. But again, that's sort of what I wanted to get to, and to get us to a point where we can maybe open it up for some questions and just talk about this a little bit more. So I will put the ball in your court at this point.